Hello everyone, good morning. Today we're going to discuss about dynamic host configuration protocol, means DHCP. So what the DHCP do and what is the advantage of DHCP? Okay, so first before going to talk about DHCP, let's talk about types of IP address. There are two types of IP address, static IP address and dynamic IP address. We have already discussed that the IP address classes and all, and this one is static IP address and dynamic IP address. So which one is the static IP address and which one is the dynamic IP address? How can we identify a static IP address and dynamic IP address? Okay, so there are ways to identify whether our system having a static IP address or a dynamic IP address. Okay, so I will show you here. Go to command prompt, ipconfig/all, ipconfig/all. See, if the DHCP is enabled, please mute yourself. If DHCP is enabled, that means this is the dynamic IP address. If the DHCP is not enabled, that is the static IP address. If the DHCP says no and you're able to see the IP address, that means static IP address. If the DHCP enabled yes and you're able to see the IP address, that is a dynamic IP address. See here, let me log in and check in this mission, because this mission using static IP address. Okay. Go to command prompt, ipconfig/all. Here DHCP enable, if you see here, DHCP enable no means this is a static IP address. If it is says yes, then it is dynamic IP address. Okay, this way we can identify the static IP address and dynamic IP address. And the other way also is there, that is in the layman style. In layman, see, open network connections, double click on it. Here also you can see DHCP enable no, means this is static IP. Still you can go to properties, and if you are able to see the IP address, that is called a static IP address. If you are not able to see the IP address here, that means a dynamic IP address. So in this way also we can identify what is the static IP address and what is the dynamic IP address. So here it is saying dynamic, right? Let me open network connections. Okay, double click, go to properties, TCP/IP. See, you couldn't see this any IP address, but the IP address is there, but you could not see. So see, go to details. See, IP address is there, but DHCP enabled. DHCP masks the IP address. You cannot see the IP address here. You cannot see the IP address here, but you can see here. You can see the IP address here. So yes, hope you get it. What is the dynamic and what is the static IP address? So you can read this definitions for entry perspective. Okay, address that are manually assigned and do not change over time. That is called static IP address. Static IP address means if we manually assign the IP address to the system, that is called static IP address. If the IP address assigned by system DHCP server, if the address is automatically assigned by DHCP server, that is called dynamic address. Dynamic IP address. Address that are automatically assigned for a specific period of time and might change. And this IP address may change over the period. Like for example, every 8 days or every 10 days, this IP address will be changed by DHCP server. But this static IP address never change until we change manually. Until we change manually, the static IP address never change. This IP address will change every 8 days or every 10 days based on the period we put in the server. This IP address will keep on changing. Okay. So why we need a DHCP server, first of all? Why we need a DHCP server? We can configure the IP address, right? So far we configure the IP address. So why do we need a DHCP server? If we can configure manually, then why we need a DHCP server? Okay, so let's, for one system or 10 systems up to 20 systems, okay, we can configure manually. We can configure the IP address manually. If we have a systems like if we have a systems like TCS, Wipro, Infosys, so there are almost lakhs of computers. Their employee strength 2.5 lakhs of, I think, TCS, if I'm not wrong. So 2.5 lakhs systems, you need to assign the IP address. Is it possible to assign IP address manually into 2.5 lakhs or 3 lakhs missions?
No, sir.
No, sir.
It is not impossible. It is not impossible. Okay, let's say we'll put 100 people and let's assign by the 2.5 lakhs IP address into 2.5 lakhs systems by 100 people. Okay, okay. But there is a chances of assigning the same IP address into multiple systems. There's human errors. So if we assign the same IP address into multiple systems, what will happen? The network conflicts will happen. So if the mobile network gives same mobile number to two people, what will happen? Those two people cannot make a calls to anyone. They will out of the network because of conflicts. So the mobile network, companies gave the same mobile number to two people. So what will happen then? Conflicts will happen. Conflicts means they cannot make calls to others. They will kick out from the mobile network because conflicts, right? So if we assign IP address manually into 2.5 lakhs missions, we might get a lot of human errors. So thus we'll get a conflicts. So to avoid all this, we need a DHCP server. We need a DHCP server. So what this DHCP server do? DHCP server dynamically assign the IP address to the client missions. The DHCP server maintains the uniqueness and assign the IP address to each mission automatically. It gives IP address automatically to the clients who is requesting for an IP address. Centralized IP address management. DHCP is a centralized IP address management. DHCP presents IP address conflicts and help conserve the uses of client IP address on the network. DHCP reduce the complexity and amount of administrative work by assigning TCP IP configuration automatically to the clients. See, this DHCP reduce a lot of administrative work to the administrator. So the DHCP server will take care everything. So, but here we need to give the range of IP address to the DHCP server. So then the DHCP server will take that range and assigning and each IP address to each machine. So administrator used to give range of IP address. Then the DHCP server take that range and assign the IP address to each machine without fail and without conflicts, without any issues. That is called DHCP server. Okay, so this DHCP server in the domain model, DHCP server should be authorized to assign IP address to client machines. So this DHCP works in the domain model, not work group model. It is a security precaution that ensure that allow only authorized DHCP server runs in the network to avoid computers running illegal DHCP server in the network. And this is one more advantage of DHCP. See, not only assigning the IP address to the client missions, not only assigning IP address to the client missions, it also take care of the security. It also take care of the security. So this is a client missions, CM. Okay, these are the client missions. So DHCP server client mission requests the IP address, DHCP server assign the IP address. Similar way, all the client missions IP address will be assigned by DHCP address, DHCP server by. Yeah. So we'll get, see here range of IP address. For example, 192.168.223 dot let's 1.0. Okay, 0 to 192.168.223.1.255. This is the range. Okay, this is the range. So what will happen? The DHCP server assign IP address 192.168.223.1.1. First come, first serve. So who will come first? They will get first IP address. Who will come next? They will get next IP address. And here the IP address are not permanent. IP address will keep changing after every 8 days or 10 days based on our uh, configuration. So you will get IP address like this. So if you put keep changing IP address of every 8 days, 8 days. So every 8 days, after every 8 days, the IP address will keep on changing. This IP address are not permanent. IP address keep changing after every 8 days. Okay. And here, as I said, there is a big advantage of this DHCP. It is a security precaution that ensure that only authorized DHCP servers can run the network. So if any illegal DHCP servers are illegal client missions, let's say this is a illegal client mission, CM client mission. Okay, or illegal DHCP server cannot enter into this network. For example, if the any mission try to ask IP address, okay, DHCP server cannot assign, can't assign to the here, can't assign because it is a domain only. It only assign only arn.com. For example, the DHCP server is in arn.com domain or forest, then only assign only arn.com clients. Only arn.com clients. Whoever part of this domain, those missions will get the IP address from the DHCP server. So there is no chance to enter into our network. Illegal client missions cannot enter into our network, arn.com domain or forest. Okay, if I try to join this illegal DHCP server into ARN domain. So arn.com is a, as I said, forest or domain, cannot enter into this DHCP illegal DHCP server, because the domain controller DC should authenticate this server and accept as a DHCP server. Otherwise, this DHCP server cannot enter into our network. So with the DHCP, the advantages are they can others illegal client missions or servers cannot enter into our network. So it is a security precaution that ensure that only authorized servers can run in the network to avoid computers running illegal DHCP servers in the network. So DH server is not only assigning IP address automatically, it is also securing our network. It is securing our network. Okay. Okay. Then it is a curious to know how the DHCP server assigning IP addresses to the client machines. Is there any backend process? Is there any backend process? Yes, there is a backend process, and I would like to show you one funny picture how the DHCP server is assigning IP address. Not here, not here, I guess. One moment. Yeah. So in interview, people will ask you question about how the DHCP server assigning IP address to the client machines. So this is a funny, that is called, this is a funny process. So DORA means usually you will get a question in the interview that what is the DORA process? DORA means DHCP, how the DHCP server assigning IP address to the client machines. What is the backend process of between one second, between server and client? Let me close this. Between server, this is the DHCP server and client. What is the backend process between these two? Let me explain in a funny way first, then we will explain in a professional way. Okay. Client mission. Hi, will you please give me an IP address to DHCP server? Client mission asking DHCP server asking an IP address. Okay. So in two, server, sure, I have XYZ IP address for you. Will you accept it? Server, response from server. Next, client, yes, I accept. Kindly issue XYZ IP address to me and send me the remaining configuration. I accept your offer. So please assign this IP address permanently to me. I mean, remaining configuration, and send a request to server. So client mission, so you accept the offer, client mission accept the offer and request that send the remaining configuration and assign the IP address. And server, okay, XYZ IP is assigned to you. So server acknowledge this. So this is a funny way to explain the DORA process. DORA means discover, offer, discover, O for offer, R for request, A for acknowledgement. This is called DORA process. So now coming to in a professional way, how the DHCP assigning IP address to the client mission. First, client mission. First, client mission. See, client mission, how when the client mission will ask the DHCP server for IP address. And go to network settings. Let's go to, okay, log into the mission. First, client mission should ask the DHCP server for IP address. But when the DHCP server, when the client mission will ask, I will show you. There is a setting which we need to, okay, there is a network connections. We need to put the put the IP address automatically. I will show you instead of explaining. If I show you, then you will get understand. Go to here, properties, no IP address. Obtain an IP address automatically. If you select this, then only system will search for DHCP server for get an IP address. If you assign IP address manually, this mission will never search for the DHCP server because system having IP address. If you erase the IP address, and click OK, then only system will search for DHCP server. Why the system is searching for DHCP server? Because of IP address. Because system needs an IP address to communicate other systems, right? So then if you place the system in, if you select the obtain an IP address automatically option, then the system started searching for DHCP server to get an IP address. Okay, now coming to here. Now the system, I select the option obtain IP address automatically. Now the client mission searching in the network, for an searching in the network for DHCP server. Okay. Finally, client mission find the DHCP server. That is called discover. Discover. Finding, searching, discover. Okay. Next. Once client mission find the DHCP server, DHCP server offer offer to client mission. Offer to client mission. 1 second. Offer. This is called offer. This is offer. Offer. Now accept the offer. Accept the offer and request back. Request. Offer. Accept the offer and request back. One moment. request back. Sorry, request. Accept the offer and request. Now the DH server, what? Acknowledge the request. So acknowledge. Acknowledge. So this is how the DHCP server and client mission backend process. So after all this process, client mission will get a IP address. This is how uh, the this is called a lead generation process. So after 8 days, the IP address will change. So next, renewal process. How the renewal process? This is lease generation process. This is lease. Only that IP address will for 8 days lease or 10 days lease based on our uh, days we put in the DHCP server. So this is lead generation process. Okay. Next, renewal process. After 8 days, how the DHCP server change the IP address in the client machine. That is called lead generation process. So this is lease. This is lease renewal process. Lease renewal process. So after 8 days, what will happen? See, they discover and everything, nothing will happen because already discovered and okay. And here request and acknowledgement. This. So again, after 8 days, client mission request to the DH server to change the IP address. So then the DHCP server acknowledge it. So give some new IP address to client mission. So here client sends a DHCP request packet and server sends acknowledgement. That's it. So this is how the lease renewal process after 8 days or 10 days. What days lease, how many days lease we put in the server based on the lease time, it will IP address will renew. Okay, and coming to so renewal and lease process. So scope, what is scope? As I said, the DHCP server doesn't have any powers to assign the IP address without the administrator help. So administrator has to put the IP address range. This is called scope. We called this is scope. So if you create a scope and in the scope we assign the range of IP address, those range so the IP addresses in between the range will assign by the DHCP server. So scope is a range of IP address. Scope is nothing but, see here, a scope is a range of IP address that are available to be leased to clients. Why? Because we call leased, because the IP addresses are not permanent to the any client missions. The DHCP server keep changing the IP addresses. So that is the reason we call leased. Leased means a particular time period only. To particular time period only will uh, will give the IP address to the particular system or client machine. Okay. So that's all about theory. Any questions? Any questions so far? So today we will install DHCP server and will create a scope. Okay. Installing DH server and create a scope. So in the real time, usually DHCP server in a separate machine, but here we are putting everything in one machine, as we don't have much infrastructure here. So I'm putting the DHCP server. I'm installing the DHCP server in domain controller DC. Okay. So there is no DHCP server here. So we need to install DHCP server in this domain controller. Okay, first go to dashboard, add roles and features. Click next, click next, click next. Here DHCP server, see, DHCP server. We need to enable this role for DHCP server. Click next, click next, click next. Restart if required. Restart the machine if required. Install. So now the DHCP role is started enabling in this machine. Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, good. Yeah, done. DHCP role is enabled. Now let's configure the DHCP. Complete DHCP configuration. Click here. Okay. Click next. So use the following user credentials or use alternative. So I'm using administrator only. Commit. That's it. See, is done. Close. DHCP configuration has been completed. Now go to tools. See here you can see DHCP now. Open DHCP. Expand this. Expand this. IPv4. Okay, this is the DHCP console. Now let's create a scope in this. Right click on IPv4, create a new scope. Click next. Here you need to give scope name. So you can give any name. I'm just giving scope 1, or you can give uh, in the real time usually names like first floor, a second floor, a third floor, like this. Okay, so I'm just giving scope. In the scope, from which starting IP address and ending IP address. You need to give starting IP address and ending IP address. I'm giving 192.168, 223, and 1. Ending IP address 192.168, 223, 254. Because 255 is not valid, so 254. Okay. Click next. Starting IP address and ending IP address. Click next. And here add exclusion and delay. Here you need to mention the exclude, because there are servers IP address which are, see, in the real time server IP address is always static IP address, not dynamic IP address. Why? If your our house address is permanent or temporary? Permanent, right? So if we keep changing the house address, what will happen? If we get any postal, um, if we get any statements or letters or anything uh, to our address, if our addresses keep on changing, what will happen? We miss the data, right? That is the reason. Likewise here, if you changing the server IP address after every 8 days, what will happen? Server clients are cannot fail to contact servers. So servers in the real time, servers always have a static IP address. See, if you changing the server IP address, let's say this is the database server. Okay, database server. This is database server. Okay, so let's say the DHCP server assigned IP address 192.168.223 dot 1 dot 1.10. Okay, so client missions usually access with the IP address, because in the real time most of the cases we connect we connect servers with the IP address. Okay, with the IP address. Okay, fine, able to connect, and so I just feeding the data into the database server and I'm just working on it. Suddenly the IP address got changed by the DHCP server. So lease process, as part of lease process, lease renewal. So change it to something else like 1.11. Now the client missions still try to connect with the old IP address. If the server IP address got changed, then client missions cannot reach server. So what will happen? Services will go down. And also here the services runs on 10 so far, and suddenly it got changed and the services also got disturbed, right? So that is the reason we never ever change the IP address in the servers, especially in the servers frequently. So that is the reason we assign the static IP address in the servers, right? So in the best example, domain controller. So in the domain controller, if you change the IP address, what will happen? Client missions cannot connect to domain controller. So client missions usually contact domain controller for authentication approval. So if the domain controller IP address changed, then where these client missions will go, right? So that is the reason servers always have a static IP address. Hope you clear on this. Okay, now come back to exclusive IP addresses. Means, see, here we placed 1 to 254. Now, few of the IP address are static IP address, right? Which we assigned. For example, this server, domain controller 10. So if I didn't exclude the IP address, which are already assigned to servers as a static IP address, what will happen? This server also, DHCP server also assign 10 IP address, because 1 to 254, in between 10 IP address is there, right? So that IP address also will assign by the DHCP server to any client. So make sure we stop assigning IP address, add exclusion, means 192, 168, 223, 1 to 192, 168, 223, 20. Don't assign 1 to 20 IP address in the range. What I mentioned the range, I'm telling to DHCP server to not assign these IP address 1 to 20. If I didn't mention here, the DHCP server may assign IP address from 1 to 254. So in between, I stopped assigning. I'm requesting or telling to DHCP server not to assign 1 to 20 IP address. Okay, click next. So this is the lease time, 8 days. If you want to change to 10 days, that's fine. 20 days, that's fine. Up to you, up to your company requirement. So let's keep as a default lease time. After 8 days, the IP address will keep changing in the client missions. Okay, next. Next, yes, I want to configure these options now. Click next. Here, router IP address. So make sure you give a router IP address. So every environment infrastructure has a router, means local gateway. So without the local gateway, we cannot go outside of the network, and outside request cannot come inside. So router is a gateway. So how the main door in our house, in the network, gateway is like that. So if you want to go out, you go out through main door, right? And if you come in, you'll come in through main door. So for network, default gateway is the main door. If you go out, and you have to through default gateway. If you want to come into the network, you have to come through default gateway. Okay, so you need to assign the default gateway 192, 168, 223, 1. Let's say this is the default gateway. Okay, click next. So make sure this default gateway will not assign to any client mission, and also it marks as a default gateway for every mission. Here, domain name. So here, if there is to configure scope client DNS servers, so it's already I added DNS servers. And what is this IP address? 11. And we need to configure additional domain controller IP address as well. Okay, 192, 168, 223, and 11. This is additional domain controller. So done. So if you have any DNS servers in your arn.com domain or forest, you need to exclude the server's IP address. Click next. Leave it this Win server. This is also kind of DNS. Before DNS, now we are using DNS, not Wins. Okay. Activate scope. Yes, I want to activate this scope now. Click. Yes. Finish. The scope is ready. Scope is ready and active. Okay. Okay. Now the DHCP server is ready to assigning IP address to missions. Let's see whether this will assign the IP address or not. Okay, so I need a client mission for this. Windows 7 is the client mission. So this will assign not only client in server also, but anyway, we have a client. So we'll test with the client. Let me shut down this to make the client mission fast. This is the additional domain controller. So if you go here, click, see address pool 1 to 254. This is excluded from the pool. DNS server. We'll talk about what is DNS in upcoming classes. Okay. Okay. And right click on it. Go to properties. Here you can see everything. If you want to change, you can change here. You can change the settings. DNS. If you want to change the scope range, you can change the scope range. And lease time, you can change lease time. Okay. And the name, you can change name. Log into this. Switch user. Oh, man, I think I'm supposed to change. Okay. And CPA.cpl. This is a shortcut for network connections. Properties. So this system doesn't have permissions to see the IP address. So I'm giving administrator and password. See, is this static IP or dynamic IP? Can anyone tell me? Is this static IP or dynamic IP?
Static IP.
Yes, static IP, because it is visible. And if you see here, DHCP is no. DHCP is not enabled. So it is a static IP. Okay. Now I'm just again administrator. This user doesn't have permissions to see the IP address. So that is the reason. Okay. I'm obtain IP address. If I select this option, what will happen? Now the system will search for DHCP server. Now the system will search for DHCP server. Okay. Click OK. See what is the IP address before? 1 second. Oh, sorry. Remember this 20. IP address is 20. Okay. Now I'm just obtain IP address automatically. Click OK. Okay. Okay. Just log off. You no need to log off also. It will assign the IP address automatically. Just I want to log in with administrator. So the IP address is 20. Okay. before. C will what IP address will get now. Administrator. I don't know. It's taking a long time. Go to ncpa.cpl. Double click. Properties. See, no IP address. Okay. Here, go to details. See, DHCP is enabled, and the system got IP address 21 IP address. So before what is the static IP address? 20. Now we got 21. And also you can check here in command prompt. ipconfig/all. See, DHCP is yes, DHCP enabled yes, and the IP address is 21. This is how the DHCP server will assign IP address automatically. So that's all for today. Any questions?
Sir,
Yes.
మీరు నిన్న పంపించారు కదా సార్ ఫైల్ అది విండోస్ 8
అవును.
అది మేము ఇంట్లో చేసా కూడా అది రావట్లేదు సార్. సేమ్ విండోస్ కి 7 ఏ ఎర్రర్ అయితే చూపించిందో ఇందులో కూడా అదే చూస్తుంది.
Okay. If possible, can you share me the screen? Let me stop this recording and screen sharing.
ఓకే సార్, జస్ట్ ఏ మినిట్ సార్.
One second, and just stop. Let me stop the recording. Yeah.